Serious, teachers at Reddit, have you ever taught a legitimate genius? What made them so smart? I teach preschool, had a 2-year in my class reading middle elementary level chapter books. My buddy was a genius as a kid. He could read something and remember it exactly. It was unreal. Smartest dude I ever met as far as every single subject. Went to Harvard after high school and we lost touch. He's a judge now. His memory was so good. The student could learn complex concepts in the span of minutes. Kid once missed an entire unit that I taught over the course of several weeks. I spent 20 minutes with her when she got back, explaining and drawing diagrams, and she got it, and got it better than anyone else in the class had. It was so much fun teaching her. My lab partner for college organic chemistry was a 15-year-old high school freshman. He was taking it for fun since he had to wait for sophomore year for high school chemistry. He was the smartest student in the class, aced every test, perfect score on all homework, but was pretty clumsy in the lab. Gave me lots of laughs during our shared lunch hour. He used my cell phone every day to call his mom to pick him up at 5 p.m. When I was in high school, there was a kid 1 grade older than me who was the smartest kid I knew at the time. Very bright, kind person, an excellent mathematician. He would regularly get perfect scores on tests and studied some advanced topics outside of class. He went on to study physics at MIT. My high school was right next to an elementary school. One day, these parents hired this smart kid to tutor their 7-year-old child in math. And when I say tutor him in math, I mean teach him calculus. I would walk by a math classroom after school and see this 18-year-old drawing gradients on paraboloids, so early vector calculus stuff, and lecturing a 7-year-old. The older kid said once that that kid's brain has many more clock cycles than mine. I attended math classes with someone that was a literal Rain Man. As a junior, he completed all the undergraduate and master's level math courses his elite university had to offer. They sent him to a special math program we were both in to challenge him further. He skipped 16 weeks of our very difficult advanced graduate level math courses to play video games, but aced his midterms and final exams, which included oral exams. He scored perfect on every standardized test he took, including SAT, Gray, Math Gray. I never saw him put any effort whatsoever into anything he did. He also published in difficult areas of pure mathematics as an undergrad. He seemed to know everything about math and seemed as if his professors were below him. He ended up completing a PhD from an elite university in pure math. One of the smartest people I ever met. He was also very bizarre in his behavior. I've taught for 12 years, all math, algebra 1, AP calculus, robotics, engineering math, and computer science, all high school grades. In that time, I have taught a lot of really smart kids. I have met a lot of really smart kids. I am not sure just how you are qualifying genius, but I am reading it to mean the truly exceptional student who displays intelligence in a way that outshines average best students. To that extent, I would estimate that I have taught about 5 such individuals. What these kids all have in common is that everything came naturally to them, almost like it was intuition. Tons of smart kids will get bored and actually do poorly in class. They don't do their easy class work. But usually the genius kids have a thirst for knowledge. They are inquisitive and motivated to find answers. As for what makes them so smart, I would say that their lucky genetics plus an internal motivation to learn is what made them so smart. I will end by saying that I think anyone can be smart with enough hard work. Depending on your genetics, your environment, and your determination, it may take a little bit of work or a whole bunch of work. He won a silver medal at the International Math Olympiad. I once taught a 4-year-old Chinese kid who really enjoyed talking about the collapse of Yugoslavia. Yes, the ability to identify complex patterns, apply unrelated knowledge to make sense of another subject, generalizing specific concepts really quickly. He was not only a genius, but a prodigy. My former piano organ student now has a DMA, Doctor of Musical Arts, and is in demand for solo performances as well as concertos with orchestra. He did all the work. I just taught him. Yep, a few. One was a genius in math, not the subject I teach. and the other is a genius when it comes to writing, research, reasoning, etc. What makes them both so smart is probably a combination of environment. They both have very supportive families and an intense desire to learn on their own. Both of these guys did way more independent learning on their own than what they got in school. And the math kid is now in grad school working on electromechanical engineering and has been published multiple times. The philosophy kid is doing his own thing and writing books. My one favorite history professor in college told me about a kid named Gabe. Gabe wasn't great with math, wasn't great with science, but this kid could create a complex map of history in his mind to be able to explain a situation in history from multiple historical standpoints. An example was when he was in my professor's Nazi Germany course and my professor was talking about Hitler's takeover in a general sense. Quick overview of the course type stuff, my professor learning what people do and don't know to shape the course a little. And one questioned how they let Hitler be elected considering Hitler's jail sentence and Mein Kampf. Gabe apparently cited 4 or so different sources of German people at the time as well as examples of sympathizers in other countries after the Nazi takeover to explain Hitler's zeal and demagogue capabilities. My professor still uses the sources Gabe cited because he wasn't even read on them. Okay, I'm going to shamelessly brag about this kid. For the record, I teach high school Spanish. We'll call the kid Jason because that's nothing like his real name and I don't wanna break FERPA. Jason played basketball and soccer. He was in art club and beta club and National Honor Society. He was even the valedictorian. Jason basically taught himself Spanish 1, and by the time he got to my Spanish 2 class, had vastly surpassed his classmates. He asked great questions and even caused me to learn quite a few things about the subject. His Spanish was ducking impeccable. He never made even a single B in my class. When we played games, his team always won. He studied hard, he was focused, and he was so ducking affable. And he was like this in every ducking class, including the AP classes. He went on to the best college in the state. Full ride. He's done study abroad in several countries, and he's been recognized several times in the school's magazine, and not a single person has a negative thing to say about him. He's so genuine and good. He's a serious, preppy white boy that gets along with everyone, the athletes, the nerds, the goth emo kids. He can even freestyle. I've gotten off track with the question, but he just makes me so proud. Jason is a ducking genius. 5th grade teacher here. I had a student who was absolutely a genius. I was teaching him 6, 7, 8th grade math and science. I found what challenges him most was my style of teaching, which required a lot of collaboration and socialization. I hope I helped him grow his strengths and weaknesses that year. Side note, I'll never forget on the 20th of April he walked into my room and said, "Hey, it's 4/20" and gave me this sly smile, huh? Kid came to Australia at 15 from Somali. Never went to school in Somali. Both parents dead. He walked his 2 younger siblings out of Somali to Ethiopia using a map he found. Then he came to Australia and entered into school. Picked up English and math so fluently he was able to graduate high school in 4 years. He's doing computer science at uni now. If that kid had grown up in Australia, he'd be on the news for being in uni at 12. Edit. He wasn't literate or numerate when he arrived in Australia. I was never a teacher, but I worked with a person that was absolutely brilliant. I have no doubt he had a seriously high IQ. He and I were software developers at the time. I've been in IT for over 20 years, had lots of jobs, and worked with lots of smart people. I have never met anyone even close to as smart as he was. My theory on what made him so smart is that he had a photographic memory. He would read something once and never forget it. We don't work together anymore but are still friends, and whenever we talk his memory never ceases to amaze me. Not just IT stuff but everything. World events, dates of things, people's names, you name it. Unquestionably a musician I've worked with is on the genius spectrum. Only one example being, we were playing a movement from John Williams' 5 Sacred Trees Concerto for Bassoon. It's actually quite modernist and not at all repetitive or popular sounding. Well, he left his percussion part at home and the show was starting in the next hour, without skipping a beat. Upon realizing he didn't have the auxiliary percussion part, which contains many different instruments all on one page, He pulled out his manuscript paper and wrote from memory without consulting other parts or the score. His part perfectly. All different instruments. Many time changes. Measures of rest etc. Genius indeed, and this is only one instance. I taught a girl who was an absolute genius. She hated it when I or other people called her that, because she didn't think she was. The main thing that set her apart was her ability to understand a concept as well as the significance that concept had to other areas based on me explaining something orally once. Most students wouldn't realize that class had started yet by the time she already figured out my lesson. See, most students, after several attempts at me explaining something, will just memorize my explanation word for word and regurgitate that on the test because they still don't understand what on earth you're talking about. Right, students? They actually figure out what you're talking about and can explain it in their own words. But this girl? She not only understood, but then applied it to other areas. That's why she was brilliant. I'm a substitute teacher and I went to cover a middle school math class. There was one very shy kind of awkward kid who was working on an assignment involving square roots. Without using a calculator, that kid was coming up with answers left and right. I thought I was some kind of joke or prank, but for the heck of it I took out my phone's calculator and asked him to multiply different 3 and 4 digit numbers. Without batting an eyelash, this kid would give me the answers almost as quickly as I could ask the question. A few occasions he had to recalculate things in his head once or twice, but it was scary how quickly the answers came. I asked him what it was like and he said that it was like having a tiny room inside his head filled with whiteboards. You can go inside this room to work on calculations. To this day I have not met another kid like that. I did not personally teach him, but he was a student at the school I taught at and the son of a co-worker. He was on J-Leno as a kindergartner, on account of his in-depth dinosaur knowledge. I don't know if he was a textbook genius, but he was probably the closest I've seen. The last I saw of him was when he was in 7th grade. I changed schools following that year. His personality was very similar to what can be seen in the Leno video. I didn't know him well, but if I happened upon a classroom with him in it, he wouldn't hesitate to casually begin explaining a topic in depth. It was as if us not knowing each other was immaterial. He was just programmed to share his vast knowledge with anyone who happened by, and it was never holier than thou. He always had a conversational tone that conveyed he really just had a lot going on up there. From a quick check, it appears as though he's now studying paleontology at a private college in state. Good to see. All of the comments of "I am one of those people" are obnoxious. Probably genetics and hard work. Anyway, I would introduce 2 loosely related topics and she would fill in the gaps on how they were connected with having little background. She somehow just was able to pull things together and build a story. Not a real story. I'm talking like an experimental procedure in chemistry. Barely had to explain and walk her through what she needs, and what needs to be considered for the experiment to work, etc. My uncle is a genius. Has an IQ of 154. He had serious problems. He would always talk down and look down to everyone. He was the youngest of 6 kids, who were all smart, and as a child would throw fits at dinner saying how no one would listen to him. Obviously his siblings didn't give a shit and were busy chowing down. In the end, he never really adjusted to life or kept a job because he didn't respect his bosses. I guess it's not the end and he's still alive, but his personality and brains has kept him from really reaching his abilities. I'm a preschool teacher, so I can't accurately judge a genius or not. My students range from 3-5. But I did have one student that stood out. He was a peer, not special ed, not on an IEP, and he was one of our younger students, 4. We would often let kids have some supervised computer time playing on a site with lots of letter games, math games, etc. for all grades. This kid taught himself how to tell time, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and start a division at the end of our school year. He had little to no help with the work. If he couldn't figure something out on his own, he'd ask for help once and then be perfectly fine continuing on his own. He's going on to kindergarten now and I'm so excited to see where he goes in life. 7th grade life science teacher. A girl I taught this year was basically great at every subject. I always sort of felt like the lab partner that was not prepared for the day. She had raw talent and great genetics. But the thing that set her apart from the others was effort. She wanted to learn and spend time learning. She was quick with everything and it came naturally. But she always gave it 100%. We had to give awards out to our students at the end of the year and I decided to not award her for her smarts. Since those are the awards she always receives, instead I gave her the award for greatest effort displayed by any student. She also is probably going to the Olympics in a couple of years. So she's got that going for her, which is nice. When I was in my last year of high school, we were expected to help 2 times a week in a first year class. For the countries, high school is about ages 12-18 in the UK. I helped in the computing class. Most of it was log in here, open the internet, here's how you open paint, blah blah. One girl however wasn't doing the stuff the others were doing. I looked over her shoulder and she was coding. She was writing code well beyond even final year high school level, and that meant she was beyond what I could even do at the time. Remember, she was just 12 at the time. I asked her about it and apparently her dad was a programmer and he'd showed her the basics and that she thought it was really easy. Kinda humbling when you're 18 and a 12-year-old is better than you at something you thought you were good at. I'm not a teacher by profession, but coincidentally was thinking about a similar topic while showering. Yes. Shower thought. What is true intellect? From my years of experience with all sorts of people from children to adults, students to business professionals, artists and philosophers, at least self-proclaimed head, etc. The one common trait I find among people I consider truly intellectual and genius is their, seemingly, natural ability to understand or observe truth as objectively as possible. I find this is often achieved by having the absence of ego when observing things and also ridding themselves of the idea of difficulty. They don't think, at least I believe, things are hard. They simply are, as that are, and it's up to them to take the time to figure it out. Now, it's not to say these people aren't egotistical or self-centered or anything, though I often find that they aren't. But at least when it comes to solving problems or observing truths, they manage to put their ego aside. I casually dated a genius, graduated high school in 5th grade, was finishing up a PhD in neuroengineering at an Ivy League school when I met him at age 23. He told me that he felt really lucky his parents noticed his knack for building computers early on and put him in an accelerated program, or else he thinks he would have become highly destructive as he got older. I will say he fulfilled every stereotype of a savant you can't name and then some. No empathy, emotional maturity of a 12-year-old. The ethical compass of a graphing calculator. Which is to say he was pragmatic to a fault and felt no guilt if he got away with something. Things that may have also been related. He was into a lot of freaky sexual shit, and was astonishingly frank about all of it. This is admittedly what I liked about him. He also idolized Justin Bieber before his comeback. One day I asked him point blank if it's because he saw himself in Bieber, and he said, come to think of it, yes. What a ride that was. In high school my good friend was a genius and it annoyed the out of the teachers. He would sit and annoy his friends or build stuff out of things he could find out of the classroom. If he was paying attention, he would interject with in-depth analysis and not quite relevant questions to sidetrack the teachers or straight up correct them and end up in debates. He also never did any homework. He calculated out the exact amount he needed to pass and found out he could pass by only doing his tests, which he always got 100% on, but had no interest in doing work. He got banned from playing pre-test studying games because he would always win and was used as the question maker for a while until he made the questions so incredibly specific and impossible to answer he got switched to the judge. He was also an all-around really cool person. Smart, cute, personable and popular, and great at sports. But he was by far the smartest person in our grade and probably the school, and graduated with a 65% average because he just did not care.